While we get set up here, huge round of applause for Jason. He touched on it a little bit, but that the fundraise for that last fund was brutal. There was a lot of sacrifice there, a lot of pain. That was really hard. And a lot of funds failed in that moment. That period of time was very, very hard. The percentage of funds that went on from like successfully went from fund two to fund three plummeted. And that's a spot where that could have been the end of Pioneer Fund. Or we could have gone back to some kind of basic small thing and gotten stuck there. But uh, to support a team of this size and the strategy that we're doing, we really needed to succeed at that fundraise, and it was absolutely extremely difficult. And it's hard for a lot of founders to even realize how hard it is to raise a fund like this, because the experience of raising for a startup, there's FOMO, there's a lot of investors, you're all well networked. It can be still very difficult to raise in a crucial moment, but for a fund, it is much harder because there's no FOMO. It drags out LPs. It's just a completely different type of ecosystem. Very, very slow, very hard. And we're doing something really unique. We're doing something totally different, and it's not traditional. And most LPs are pretty traditional, and they want the usual thing. They want to see why you're different and unique, but we are really different and unique. And that plays a huge role in our success and our future success. But to actually get people on board with that, easy to get YC alumni who understand it, but to build a team of that many people to really understand it and to go after the institutional LPs and the people who have never seen this before and convince them that they should actually put their money into this fund and not see it again for a decade or more, and just believe that this is going to work, really, really hard. So, Jason, an incredible job on that.
When I came in, I spent a lot of time and Pioneer as a whole before like jumping into tech. There's one thing that really stuck out to me, and that Jason's the kind of person that will just steadily go at it. My understanding is fun three never slows down. And there's a world, an alternate world, if we had someone else do fundraising, it wouldn't have gone the same. Like he has taken a lot of no's to get to the yes. We tell our founders that, like, don't worry about the no's, go for the yeses. I think the no's here are way bigger. I really cannot express what I've learned about him in terms of his like work ethic, his grit. Man just kept going. His effort did not slow down. So the fun was slow. So
Relentless, you might say. Um, so I'll talk about a little bit about the future, where we're going. Jason touched on it a bit. At the core of where we're going is our seed fund. This is the backbone of everything we do and everything we will ever do. This is the critical thing that we must get right. And we have done a really good job at building the seed fund and making it successful. This batch, the number one thing I heard from VPs and SVPs on Alumni Demo Day is that they watched all the presentations, made a list of all the companies they were excited about, and then Pioneer Fund had already invested in all of them. That is incredible because every other fund out there is trying to invest in the top YC companies. It's extremely competitive. It's extremely fast. There's 180 companies that we're simultaneously looking at. And we felt this batch, kind of last batch, but really this batch, we kind of nailed it. We actually were able to, at scale, evaluate 180 startups simultaneously and invest in essentially all the ones we wanted to before any other fund. And it felt like we are successfully competing against the entire ecosystem of investors that are trying to do what we're doing. Also, with this Fund 3 fundraise, what we've started to see is that LPs view Pioneer Fund as the fund that does this kind of portfolio construction scaled across YC. We invest in 25% of companies, and we've talked to a lot of other GPs who wanted to do that and found that they couldn't, because when they talked to LPs, LP said, "Isn't that Pioneer Fund?" And that is, that's sort of because of the work that Jason and the team did to talk to the LP world about what we're doing and convince them that we would actually be able to do this. Now they've all heard Pioneer Fund and they associate us with this strategy. So the work we do at Seed, I think we've really figured out how to do it well, but we must keep that feedback loop going. We must constantly be learning, constantly be improving, constantly be, improving our operations, which are incredible. Shout out to James. Huge shout out to James. James, you see him everywhere, right? Like every investment channel you're in, you see him. He's on the ball all the time, but then you're not in all the investment channels. So multiply that by like 50 and you can sort of start to imagine, and then there's a lot going on behind the scenes too. So, that's, multiply it by 100 and you sort of start to kind of vaguely conceive of what James is doing. And same for Mike. Like every investment we make, not only does a wire come out in like 5 minutes, but also then there's an entire administrative infrastructure behind the scenes that we have to like report on a quarterly basis, explain everything to LPs, audited financials. It is brutal. And we're doing that at an enormous scale. So huge shout out to Mike and team also. That's our seed. Now, we've built a really good reputation in the YC ecosystem. Really good. We've built a great reputation with YC itself. We've built a great reputation with founders in the batch. Everyone knows Pioneer Fund. Everyone respects us. Everyone knows that we are going to behave properly as investors. We're going to make a fast decision. We're known in the YC world. And that's a great, great starting point. Now it's time to do 2 things. One, like Jason said, start to tell our story more externally, share a little more with the world what we're doing and what we're building. And we have a great core to do that from, but it's going to take some work and strategy and experimentation to figure out how to share that story in the broadest way possible. And the second thing is founder portfolio support. This is something that we have. We have portfolio support, but we want to become number 1. We should be the most supportive fund in our portfolio. And we should be, and we realized we can prove it. We're not that right now, but we see all the investor updates from all the companies. We read them all. We see who they're thanking for helping them. And we see shout out to Pioneer Fund, shout out to this person, shout out to this person, shout out to this fund. We're now tracking that. And we are going to climb that leaderboard until we are number 1. And we will be able to share with the world, we are provably the most helpful investor in our portfolio. There's people we should learn from. Gaurav's going to talk about this way more. There's people we should learn from. Eliam, Steve Johnston, Taro. Like these are people who like have a reputation within Pioneer Fund for helping the portfolio. And all of you have contributed in various ways to requests for help and things like that. But we have more experimentation to do, more things to build. We want to be number 1 and we want to be public about it. That's what part of the story of sharing with the world. We are going to be the most helpful top number 1 at portfolio support. All right, Prime. We have this crazy seed fund, 750 startups in the portfolio, soon to be 1,000. We're the most active seed investor in the world. We're the most active investor in AI in the world at seed stage. And we realized that we're seeing all the top companies in the world that have gone through YC. We're investors in almost all of them. And we have this huge opportunity, and we've been executing on this at a smaller scale with various follow-on vehicles to invest again. That's useful for founders because fundraisers are annoying. It's hard to decide you want to take 6 months off from building your company when you're growing really well to go and run a fundraise process, start talking to investors. We can do a better job than anyone else in the world can at investing in our own portfolio. We don't need to wait for other investors to realize what we already know. And so we've been doing this. We've been investing preemptively in our own portfolio at a small scale successfully. And so with Pioneer Prime, we want to scale that up. Some of you have seen this already, and this is a little outdated. This is from a few months ago. This is a list of all the top YC startups that YC has backed since 2022, sorted by valuation. And some of these are redacted. They have code names. The number one on there is actually now a $1.3 billion company. That's capital with a K. Now, if we are investing in 25% of companies, which we are, if we were doing that randomly at demo day, there's a list of 16 of the top companies here. If we were investing randomly at demo day, you would expect that we would decide to invest in about 4 of these companies, 25%. And at demo day, we would probably get into, when I talk to other GPs, we'd probably get into about half, maybe 2. So how many would we invest in from this list? About 2 of these if we were investing randomly at demo day. In orange on the next slide are the companies Pioneer Fund actually invested in. That kind of says to me more than anything that we've seen that we're doing this. This is the sort of result of all the work that we've put into figuring out how to invest at seed at scale. As you know, and this is sort of adapted from a little early preview deck that we shared with LPs, we have this crazy network, 500 YC founders. We can fill this out now. We hit the 500. And one thing we want to do with Prime is involve you all more in helping us look at the companies that are already in the portfolio that we're considering for follow-on investments. I'm not going to go into too much detail on how we're going to do this right now, but suffice to say that we've figured out how to do it. We have the best information of anyone about our portfolio, and our portfolio contains essentially all the top YC startups now. We read every single investor update from every single founder every month or quarter that they send an update. I actually personally read them all. But then the team also reads them. We track everything. We identify which companies are the top in the portfolio, and we know which companies are going to do well before any other VC even knows that they're planning to raise or even knows that they are doing well or anything. We have the first look, and we don't need to wait for any external signal from other investors. We never have. We're not allowed to. We figured that out, by the way, for follow-on, because early on in Pioneer Fund's history, LPs wanted to invest again, they wanted to do follow-on checks in our top companies, and they eventually realized they couldn't do it quickly enough. They couldn't do it confidently enough. They asked us to put together this little tiny Opportunity Fund 1 vehicle to invest in our own companies. And so we started tracking which ones are going to go and raise a Series A, which ones are going to do well. And then we would wait 6 months, and then they would go raise from a top VC, and we would do our little pro rata investment. That went really well. If, we didn't automatically do it. We did it if we thought it was a great company. But we realized we're predicting this way ahead of time. We already know which companies are going to go on to do well. It did take a long time to build up the confidence to be able to sort of invest beyond the seed stage, reading updates, pattern matching, understanding what it looks like to be an outlier company. But now with our huge portfolio and the sort of calibration that we've built up over time, we are really like uniquely positioned to be able to do this. When we see an outlier company, we know it's an outlier company because the outlier companies are in our portfolio already. We know that the top companies of the top companies are going to be great. So it's completely an unfair advantage that we have. We have now roughly a 90% follow-on acceptance rate. We are getting more than our pro rata share. So LPs say, oh, well, do you have pro rata side letters? Now we say we don't need them. We don't need a pro rata side letter. Founders want us to invest more. Solves a problem for them. You know this already, but we invest before all the top VCs. Sometimes 6 months before, sometimes a year before, sometimes more. The world eventually realizes, but they don't have the information that we have. A couple case studies to just walk through really quick. So Capital, it's a fintech company in LATAM. Like, kind of amazing that we're even able to look at a company like that. The expertise that we have, the ability to look globally in every industry, like really incredible. We invested during YC. We saw how well they were doing and decided to invest preemptively with, they didn't mention fundraising or anything. We just said, can we invest more? And they said, sure. So we invested more. That then essentially became part of their Series A led by Tribe. And then they have just exploded. The old data is that they're at $200 million in annualized revenue and profitable. They're actually significantly higher than that now. And they just became the first unicorn backed by YC since 2022 with a $1.3 billion valuation led by Tribe. So that's a case where we invested at seed and we knew that this was a top company and invested preemptively before their Series A, before any other investors were even looking at it. Recall. We passed on them when they went through YC. And then they pivoted. And then we heard about them through the venture partner network. Someone said, hey, we passed on Recall a little while ago, but they're doing something new and it seems interesting. Recall Power is the API that powers all the meeting bots. So if you want to build on top of Zoom or Google Meet or anything like that, you're probably going to use Recall behind the scenes. And this was kind of a little early days in that, like no one had meeting bots on their calls that much. So just it was sort of weird if you did. But we sort of understood the potential, invested post pivot in their seed round, and again, they started growing like crazy, and we're watching them take off. They have platform effects, so that's a huge accumulating advantage. we again decided, let's invest preemptively. We just offered them more money and they said, sure. And then that again became part of their Series A, but we invested way more than our sort of pro rata share would have been. That's a huge success. They just announced their Series B, led by Bessemer, at a $250 million valuation. Great company, and that's clearly just the beginning for them. I'll do another case study. It's not on here yet, but Exa. So Exa, you may have seen, recently raised at a $750 million valuation led by Benchmark. And that's one we invested in at seed stage. They were talking in some interviews that they just had that no one believed what they were doing. So Exa at the time was using LLMs for search. This was before ChatGPT. We as a team understood what Exa was doing immediately. Incredible company, super technical. They were doing internet scale indexing as this tiny little startup, and then feeding it into LLMs in order to do better search. In my investment notes for Exa, I said, this is probably what it felt like to talk to the Google founders at the beginning. And so we invested at seed. Then, and I guess this different. There's no graph yet, but we were reading their updates, watching their progress, and they had no revenue, but they were making incredible technical progress, like really top tier technical progress on a month-to-month basis on a really difficult problem. Then they also reframed what they were doing. At first, they were using LLMs for search, and they reframed it to say, we are building search for LLMs. And they said, again, in some recent interviews, no one understood what that meant. Why would LLMs want search? But at the time, we were using LLMs and seeing these LLMs are using like the Bing API. And when you ask them a question, they would actually answer worse if they had search enabled. It's kind of still like that because not everyone's using Exa yet. They actually answer worse using search because they would check and find an SEO, crap, and then answer like that was the fact, even though the LLM itself knew better. And so they were doing search. They were doing search for LLMs, using LLMs. And so we decided to, again, invest preemptively. No one was talking to them about fundraising. We invested at a 30 million cap on a safe. They said, that sounds great because we have a lot of compute needs. This is, difficult thing we're going through. No one believes what we're doing yet. We invested. They went on to raise their Series A, led by Lightspeed at a $70 million valuation, and then Benchmark at a $750 million valuation. So these are like 3 examples that came out last week. Those all announced their raises last week, where we understood what they were doing at seed, believed in the founders at seed, followed along their progress, understood the progress, understood that it made them a top company, followed on preemptively without any other signal other than how the companies were doing in our own judgment and opinion. We're going to just keep doing that. And like Jason said, the opportunity for Pioneer Prime is in the billions. This first Pioneer Prime will be not $1 billion fund, but the next one might be a $1 billion fund. It can scale up beyond that as well. There is a huge amount of capital that can be given to our companies. These are the top companies. We know about them before anyone, and it solves a real problem for founders. One of the things that we realized doing Pioneer Fund at seed was that, like Jason in the early days talking to YC, like how do we make this a great fund? Well, okay, 48-hour decision window. That seems like a great thing. Founders would like that, right? Back in 2018, that was not the norm. And now investors are sort of catching on and going fast. But that was not the norm. The norm was investors ghosting and being slow and being difficult. And it's still like that in a lot of cases. The Series A is kind of worse. You really have to, as a founder, plan out when you're going to raise your Series A. You have to, the companies that are growing the fastest, sometimes the companies in our portfolio that are growing the fastest say, we would like to raise a Series A, but we can't stop talking to customers because we're growing too fast. So I guess we'll do it later, but we're like, we really want it now. We know we can really solve a big problem for founders by just making the Series A and the fundraise at that moment much easier for them. And so in a way, it feels like what we can do to help founders on the fundraising front is in some ways even greater here. And our advantage in a way may be even greater here because of all the work that we do at Seed in order to find the top companies. We sort of have the ability to carry that forward. So that's Pioneer Prime. So the question is what our target ownership would be for a Series A company. That will evolve over time. Right now, the idea, so our follow-on investments historically have ranged from $200,000 to $600,000. We will ramp that up some in Pioneer Prime. But there's an eventual world in which we can potentially lead the Series A's before there's even a Series A raise. Yeah. Yeah.
Or is that potentially a situation where we could have essentially an unpassed vendor? Is a situation where it's a company that didn't invest previously, but did it at AA?
Great question. So the question is, with Pioneer Prime, are we investing just in the seed portfolio, or are we also investing in companies that we originally didn't invest in? And yes, the answer is both. So we have the best information in our portfolio. And when we look at other Series A's, we realize when founders put together their deck and their presentation and their pitch, we have actually much less information overall. So we have this huge advantage in our own portfolio. But Prime is a vehicle where we can, when we have a really important miss that we realize, we can use Prime to try to correct that. And so if we miss a top company, with Prime, we can go and correct that miss. The other thing we can do, there's only two, yeah, there's probably a couple more on the list now. Yeah. And by the way, one of those is a pivot. One thing we need to get better at Seed or Prime or the combination is companies that completely pivot after demo day. We ignored those for a while, not ignore, but we didn't prioritize them. When we looked back at the historical YC outcomes, none of those pivoted after demo day. Airbnb was Airbnb, Instacart was Instacart, DoorDash was DoorDash. You go to Stripe was Stripe. You go down the list, none of those pivoted. But we are seeing that happen more. And so now more of our sort of like anti-portfolio companies are post-demo day pivots. And we think that might be because the opportunities and the landscape are changing so fast that pivots kind of can succeed more quickly and make more sense. It's easier to pivot, it's easier to build. That's some hypotheses there, but that might be something we need to get better at. Yeah. And then one more thing on Prime, another thing we can do is look out at the companies across the world that are not YC companies, and on occasion say, this is a top company in the world. We need to go try to invest in that. We did that with Anthropic. So we invested in the Series C of Anthropic at a $5 billion valuation. This was a case where we just saw that Anthropic was going to be enormous. This was before, this was just as their first AI models were coming out. We had venture partners. working at Anthropic, and we managed to get a demo, an early preview demo of like talking to the, so we had it in our like Slack so that we could like talk to the new Anthropic AI. Realized it was extremely intelligent, better than ChatGPT in many ways, or it wasn't ChatGPT, GPT-3. Realized that a lot of our portfolio companies would want to use the Anthropic models, reached out directly or got an intro from a VP to the CEO and founder of Anthropic, said, hey, we're Pioneer Fund, we're a bunch of YC founders. Wouldn't it be good if Anthropic were closer to the YC ecosystem? Can we invest? He said, sure. We happen to be about to raise. We invested in Anthropic at the Series C. That just announced a $183 billion valuation. That's a huge success. We won't do that a lot, but we realized that the YC ecosystem that we've built with 500 YC alumni actually allows us to get into top companies that are outside of the YC network just because of the sort of tie-in with YC. That's useful for people. That's respected. And so we can use the network, and we're connected in. So
We didn't invest, wanted to valuation, but they kept sending us updates and we followed on into them.
yeah,
And you'll probably start seeing emails from James where, hopefully the few occasions of roundfuls that we don't get into, where James is still asking for us to get updates. So it's built up.
yeah. We're offering a safe cap. Yeah. 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 So the question is about signaling risk. I think the general feeling in the industry is that the signaling risk problem didn't turn out to be the biggest deal ever. Earlier on in venture, like 15 years ago, that felt like a real, like, you had a VC and it was a VC partner. And if they didn't believe in your next round and they didn't invest, it was like, you're dead. Like no one's going to invest in you. It's not really like that anymore. Good companies go on to raise, but yeah, there's some things we will and should do to sort of not exaggerate that potential signaling risk. Yep. Yeah. Yeah, Rob.
Was doing a lot of follow-on and bigger funds, later stage funds and stuff, and they kind of like reeled that back. I'm curious if there's any, obviously they have a lot of great data as well, and that was probably their thinking. Any lessons like you learned from like what they did or they stopped doing or anything like that?
We don't have like super inside scoop on it, but I would say that it felt like they operated the sort of continuation vehicle a little more like a traditional investor. Like, when the founder's raising, it's like one of multiple investors you could talk to. We didn't see them, we could see it in our own portfolio. We didn't really see them successfully identifying and investing in the top companies. And so I think just the way they did it didn't work out. Now YC still has follow-on checks, and we're really happy when, okay, so in a few cases now, we're kind of like leading these in between rounds, and YC will sometimes join in with us. That's nice. Yeah. Yes. Yeah. Well, Greg. Uh, I see. So the question is, could we at seed say, if you do well, we'll potentially proactively invest? Good question. Yeah, that's something for us to think about. Yeah, we've mentioned it a few times, but you're sort of asking, is it a selling point we can ultimately use with founders? Right. Yeah. Mhm. Yeah. Yeah, good question. So the question is this a separate raise, a separate fund from the seed fund? We've gone back and forth on how to do this. So with Fund Two, we had one fund with seed and follow on. Before that, with Fund One, we had a seed fund and then that separate little opportunity vehicle. Then we had another sort of like little separate opportunity vehicle. Um, and LPs have different opinions on what's right, what's the best. We realized this is the way to do it. The way to do it for us is one prime fund that sits on top of all the seed funds. And so we don't have to care which fund invested at seed. We don't have to time, we don't have to hold back capital from fund one in case a fund one outlier comes up and we want to invest later. Uh, we don't have to tell LPs, well, you're investing in this one, but this company is doing really well, but you don't get access to it because it was from a different fund structure. So this is the future where we have one prime vehicle. It'll be a multi-year vehicle, but it sits on all the deal flow from across the Pioneer portfolio. And there won't be any question once that's spun up, there won't be any question of which vehicle gets first allocation or anything like that. If you had reserves built into the seed, then they should really get the allocation before prime, stuff like that. So Fund Three has a little bit of follow-on capital built in just because we didn't have prime ready, but we will invest that and be done, and then we'll have prime, and prime will just cleanly sit on top of all the future vehicles. Yeah.
That venture fund, both, yeah, I imagine different people. I don't know, well, what that means, yeah, venture partners coming in, invest in that, and how that affects anything. But also, that sounds like a much more kind of always on model versus the cadence of demo days. So what that means in terms of like venture partner involvement.
Yeah. So the question is about venture partner involvement when it comes to helping with with Prime, since it's sort of always on, which is true. We're sort of always constantly looking at all the opportunities available to us, um, and then also being able to invest and benefit from it. So there will be carry points from Prime that come down to the community. And so there's the goal of this is to benefit everyone, to benefit the whole community and at a sort of ever growing scale. So we don't get sort of stuck with a certain seed fund size. In terms of how to support and help it, we have a lot to build there. We've sort of done it internally, figure out how to do it. But but the idea is to surface for people who want to be involved in be able to surface it more easily for people to be able to contribute and lend their opinion. But yeah, it'll be at people's discretion whether they are sort of like leaning in and wanting to be active, or only when called upon for a particular type of company that maybe they were really excited about at seed and we want their expertise to understand how the company's doing.
do we still think that most of them will come?
So the question is twofold. The returns, what do we anticipate for the multiple on prime compared to the seed? And then what do we anticipate for the sort of absolute return from prime versus seed? Over time, the absolute return as prime grows, the absolute return will come more from, in terms of just raw capital returned, will come more and more from prime. But there's a mistake that many of the multi-stage funds make that we don't want to make. The multi-stage funds, the like multi-billion dollar funds, they realize all their returns and all their AUM comes from later, Series B or Series C or whatever it is. And then they dabble at the early stage. Their best people are at the late stage where the AUM is. That's where they're making the real decisions. Then they have little experiments early on to sort of maybe be at the table when the company's raising next time. They'll do on and off dabbling, but it's just completely meaningless to them. We don't want to make that mistake. We believe at the core, at the heart of this is our seed fund. We must do an incredibly good job at our seed fund in order to even have prime. If we didn't have the seed fund, we should not do prime. And if we didn't do a good job at the seed fund, we should not do prime. And so we're keeping the seed fund at the heart of this. In terms of the effort, the people, what we're doing, our attention, seed is the core. And it should stay the core forever. Then the other question was the multiple. Yeah, so there's a possibility that the prime multiple could actually be higher than the seed multiple. Because we are investing at a higher valuation, but we're filtering down by actually even more than that on a percentage basis. And so when we do the math, it can come out, depending on some details, it can come out similar or potentially even higher than the seed fund.
Most of our money's gonna come from prime, but we have to keep all the effort in the field.
Yeah, hearts at seed. Yeah.
Besides prime,
Yeah. That might be a good time to turn it over to Gaurav.